Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about instructional design, sort of an introduction to instructional design. So there's two parts. First, in this first part, we're going to talk about what design is and what instructional design is, and then the types of things instructional designers do, like the industries they work in, the types of things they make. And then the second part, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the types of models, process models and such that designers actually use when they design. So let's start with what is design. Here's one definition. Everyone designs who devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. So the baby does not like the situation of the broccoli in the mouth, so it's trying to create a situation that is more preferred. Here's another that I thought about design I thought was interesting. Design is the interaction between understanding and creation. A lot of the time, designers will spend a lot of time trying to understand a context, a user, an idea, and they'll do that in tandem with actually creating something. So thinking of design as that interaction between understanding and creation is just a really interesting idea. This is one that I use more, that a design is a structure adapted to a purpose. So let me explain that a bit. So you see, these are all doorknobs. They all open doors in one way or another, but they're different. They form different functions. So this one has a lock, this one doesn't. This one is kind of fancy. This one's more simple and sleek. They open using different mechanisms. And so different doorknobs are designed for different situations. It's a structure that is adapted to the purpose of where that doorknob actually is, what type of door it's on, and what needs to happen there. So it's like going from this is the universal and true, where we have one truth. So most scientific thinking is to some degree about the universal and true. We're trying to find out what is. In design, we are trying to move into the particular and real, where this doorknob isn't the only one truth. It's one of many possibilities. You could do a lot of different things for this same doorknob, and it would still work. We're just trying to find something that works well for the purpose it's settled in. And when we talk about the ultimate particular, that means not only is this the doorknob you could buy at the store, it's this particular doorknob on this door in this picture on this day and how it functions. So based on that, this definition of design, we're going from moving from the universal, general, particular to the ultimate particular, which is the specific design. So we're taking general knowledge and theory and we're applying it to a specific context. Or some people will say you're actually learning from within that specific context instead of that application step. It's just a difference of theoretical opinion there. We're learning to see things in certain ways. There are certain processes we have to learn for design. And then there are these things called design principles that are kind of suggested things about how something usually works best, but there's no absolutes. So I might say that it's usually best to left align text, especially if I have long chunks of text. That's a design principle, but there might be some times that it is not useful or not necessary. But what I want you to remember for this video is these parts of what it means to design. So then if we move into what is instructional design, here's a word cloud. Educationaltechnology.net created it out of a whole bunch of different definitions of instructional design. There's a lot of different opinions about what instructional design is, and it's even called a lot of different things. Okay, so this is actually, they call this educational technology, but it's different than some educational technology definitions. It focuses on facilitating learning and improving performance by creating, using, and managing technological processes and resources. This managing part is probably, the using and managing is probably more specific to educational technology than instructional design, but the creating is the big part of instructional design. Here's another different definition. This is specific to instructional design in 2002. It talked about an art and science creating instructional environment and materials. So environment could be a museum, it could be a classroom, it could be an online LMS learning management system space like Moodle. But instructional design, we're creating an environment and materials. And the goal of those materials is to go from the state of not being able to accomplish something to the state of being able to accomplish the task. So remember that first design definition, going from what is to what is more preferred? That's what you're doing. You're trying to create an instructional environment and materials that help the learner go from where they are now to actually being able to do something. Here's a 2007 definition. It talks about instructional design as a systematic process employed to develop education and training programs in a consistent and reliable fashion. A lot of instructional designers use terms like systematic and consistent and reliable because they've developed certain processes and ways of working that they think can enhance learning consistently instead of just in one case or another case, that it can generally apply and increase learning in many cases. So as you'll see, as we learn more about instructional design, there's a lot of systematic pieces of it. There's also a lot of other terms that people use instead of instructional design. Instructional technologist, learning designer. All these different terms are things people use. Right now, the trend is more towards learning designer. In fact, the book that we use for the instructional design class is based on learning design instead of instructional design. But just so you're aware of different terms people might use for the similar idea. Okay, so let's talk about what different instructional designers do. So the first one is informal learning spaces. So you see museums, children's museums, any type of museum really, usually includes instructional designers in figuring out how to arrange the exhibit, the different plaques or the different signs, and different pieces of exhibits. Even in like gardens and things like that, I actually have a friend who works in a garden as an instructional designer. You're creating an opportunity for learning. You're creating an environment for learning. So it doesn't have to be a direct instruction. It can just be creating things that help people learn. Another example, the people who create like instructions for things, assembly instructions, they create a sign like this that it's a tipping hazard to avoid injury. They have to try to make something that's really clear, will catch people's attention, make sure they can understand it really well. Those are all tasks that instructional designers work on. There's a lot of workplace training. So a lot of the original instructional design work actually happened in the U.S. military around World War II. That's when instructional design really took off. And so there's a lot of instructional designers that work in the military and help with military training. When you go to like those sexual harassment seminars or you complete those online modules for your workplace training, those are usually created by instructional designers. This is like a McDonald's menu assembly. I've never worked in fast food, but if you have, they have to figure out ways to help everyone, all the employees know how to assemble the sandwiches like quickly and accurately with a high quality. And so they'll actually, create instructions like this that they found help people complete a task easily. Another place instructional designers work is for like educational technology companies. This is Imagine Learning, and that's actually a company that I worked for a while. IXL is another one. There's a whole bunch. And then probably the most common use right now of instructional technology is for online learning or e-learning. Learning management systems. So at ULM, we use Moodle, which is an open source system. But there's a lot of private companies, like one called Canvas that a lot of schools will use, or Blackboard you might have heard of. A lot of instructional designers help develop those learning management systems. A lot of them will work with university professors and help them enhance their courses. There's also working for Pearson, creating textbooks or curriculum and textbooks, websites like PBS Kids. I always think it'd be really cool to be an instructional designer that works with Sesame Street. Some instructional designers actually mostly make instructional videos about things, like those food safety videos you might do in a training session. So these are all different types of solutions that an instructional designer might do to try to help someone go from what they know now and what they can do now to a more preferred knowing and doing and being state. All right. So come back for part 2, where I will talk a little bit more about the specifics of how instructional designers do this.